Hey everyone, my name is Jimmy Smith, and welcome to episode number 83 of the Rambler podcast, where we are passionate about sharing what makes Cathedral Prep the standard of excellence. On this episode of the podcast, we are thrilled to have CJ Toledano on as a guest. CJ graduated from Cathedral Prep in 2005, and he is a writer, director, comedian, NBA media personality, and the founder of Follow Through Studio. Formerly, he was the creative director and host for House of Highlights and Bleacher Report. He was also a staff writer for Late Night with Jimmy Fallon, ran creative for the Detroit Pistons with Funny or Die, and most recently wrote and directed several Nike/Jordan series starring the likes of Zion Williamson, Jason Tatum, and Giannis, which is awesome, and the opening night spots for NBA on TNT starring Drewski. As a face of Follow Through, you may also have seen him hosting NBA shows alongside the likes of John Wall, Richard Jefferson, Adam Lefkoe, and Taylor Rooks on assorted podcasts and shows such as Point Game, NBA Twitter Live, and Wake Up Basketball for Twitch. So very cool background, CJ. We're very excited to have you on the podcast. Welcome on.
Thanks for having me, Jimmy. It's not often these days I get to talk about my days at prep, how it sort of like inspired my career, despite it looking like a troublemaker during my time there. But it actually was very instrumental in this sort of creative endeavors that I've had over the last couple decades. So thanks for having me. And I just missed our reunion this past weekend. And so I feel like we're getting to relive some of those memories here on the podcast on record, which I was bummed I missed and couldn't do with my old classmates. So I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, it was fun. I got to stop by. We hosted a big Friday night picnic at the school with Prepinville alumni this past Friday. And then on Saturday, all the classes go off and do their own things. And I stopped by to visit your classmates from Prep and Villa. They had a combined reunion, which was cool. Yeah. And Pat Grab, yourself, Ryan Zapolsky, some stories that we can't share on the podcast, but fun ones we were talking about.
I will say, and I feel like I don't know of any other classes and the stories that happened with them, but I feel like even as freshmen, we knew we were a legendary class, and maybe, for the good and the bad. But it's some of the most fun years of my life, which I'm sure we'll get into on this episode.
Yeah, we certainly will. Prep's always held a special place for many of us, and whether somebody's listening, they're still in the area, or they're out in the country or the world somewhere listening in, like you are. Prep still unites us and brings us together, which is pretty cool. And but yeah, why don't we start there? One of the first questions I like to get to know people by and share with our listeners is why you decided to attend Prep. So maybe you can tell us a little about your kind of like a short background, but how you ultimately ended up becoming a Rambler.
Yeah, I mean, my family moved to Erie when I was 5, and we got right away started in the Catholic, the diocese, St. George. I went to St. George from kindergarten through 8th grade. And, you start playing sports in 5th grade, and then that's when you start meeting, other friends who end up being friends, through playing football, through playing basketball, soccer, whatever, and then school dances and whatnot. And so my brother, actually, he was 5 years ahead of me. He went to Prep, and then just from meeting and just like being in Erie, as just the reputation that Prep has. And my parents also, they had moved to America. They were immigrants and were striving for, the best life they could give us. And Prep has that reputation of just, from academics to, I would even say like social and just the reputation of what some of the alumni go on to do. And so it was just like such a no-brainer for us. My brother and I, that we'd be going to Prep, and it's, again, I told you just some of the highlight of my life and some of the best memories and some of the best friends who I still talk to this day. So there was never, like, we grew up, 5 minutes from McDowell, and and it was, and I had some friends at McDowell who I'll never admit, but it was never a question, like we were going to Prep from day one.
That's really cool. That's neat to hear, especially the fact that your parents were from Erie. It's not like your dad went to Prep or whatnot. So it's not like you had that background to be able to still say there was no question. That's where we were going. We were excited to be Ramblers. And you mentioned your brother was class of 2000, 5 years older than you. So it's cool you guys share a reunion year. For every 5 years, you guys can do that together. But yeah, that's a really cool story.
Yeah, it was, and too, like, even in grade school, like Friday night going to Veterans Stadium. I don't even know if they play at Veterans Stadium very often, but just going to prep games. And I mean, I got to witness that 99 team and that 2000 team. And we'll talk about how I have a career in sports now, but it was like, getting to see those teams and see them talked about nationally. It was just like, oh, you have the opportunity to go to a school that's rich in academics and sports and all that. Like, yeah, you're going to go.
Yeah, that probably was pretty cool for you to tag along with your big brother to go to those veteran stadiums games and be able to do that. We usually play like one game a year at Vets, whether it's we're playing Erie High or we're hosting McDowell, we'll do it there. We, of course, have the event center now over on 12th Street, which is for our home games, unless they're too large capacity like those ones. So it is neat to go back there because I, like you, remember being a kid, going to Vet Stadium for the Friday night prep football game. A lot of special times and memories, as you mentioned. And, speaking of that, what are some of the things that really stick out to you? So now you're at prep. You already said you guys had this sense that you felt you're going to be a legendary class. What were some of the memories that really kind of come back to you as you're thinking about your time at prep?
Well, so my career at prep started. I like I said, I played football at St. George, and then made some friends there. And so I was already deciding to play freshman football at prep, and so it started right away. And it's something new when at the time, and I know that the school is co-ed now, but it was all boys at the time, and that was different. It was different for the good and the bad, but it was just like everyone, I don't know, we became fast friends. Even the new kids that I hadn't met through grade school, I was meeting them for the first time at freshman football, and you just felt this bond right away. And those were your friends you're going to be around, from sports, in the school year, you're on bus rides and all that, and the lunches and all. It just was like, honestly, and I wasn't a part of a frat in college. It was fun. Like, yes, this was school, but I was just having, these really great bonds with my classmates, and like these guys had my back. And of course, like I mentioned before, there was a rivalry with McDowell, and not so much with other schools, but with McDowell. But you go to Mill Creek Mall, and we were getting into trouble, but even older prep guys would have our backs or anything, and we weren't starting fights, but we were just little troublemakers. And you still no one was going to mess with you because you went to prep. And it was just like you felt a part of a community right away. So and again, some stories I can't share in here, but it's just like you get a bunch of boys in one room. It's just, you're gonna have a lot of laughs for sure.
Yeah, we'll get you back for your 25th reunion here to Erie, and then talk about the stories of that you can't share on the podcast. So if listeners want to hear and indulge in some old times, fun stories, book it on your calendar 5 years from now.
I'll do it. We'll do an after dark episode. But
that's a good idea. The after dark.
But just even talking about freshman football, and we talked about those championship teams. I played sports and it was fun, in grade school, but when you go to prep, you hear the stories of how serious it is. You could potentially be ranked in the country, and the programs are very serious. I was coached by, Coach Mishler, who I know just came back, and he's a legendary coach. And I think we had Coach Cox our first or freshman, but it was just these were all guys who also went through the prep system, and this was for real. It was the first time where I was doing optional plyometrics and then 2-a-days and whatnot. It was very serious, and it was sort of the first time I was exposed to truly committing to something, and seeing how that paid off. And so it was I always loved sports. I always loved it through a fun lens, but I kind of witnessed it through a discipline, as a way to learn discipline and how to improve yourself as a man. And I really enjoyed. I played football for 4 years. I was out for an ACL 1 year, but it was just always such a big learning experience. And I love the sports to this day, and I think a large part of that was from the time I got to play and wear prep sweatshirts, the Letterman jacket and all that stuff. It was really cool. Thing to do.
For sure. to especially commit to, the prep football team after, them winning their first state championship with the teams that they had. You're coming in as a freshman, a couple
Yeah.
years after that. And yeah, I mean, that level of success demands excellence, right? Demands
Mhm.
commitment, all the things you just talked about. I played football my freshman year, but beyond that, I did not. I actually played baseball. That was my
Nice.
sport all 4 years at prep.
Yeah.
But I know exactly what you're talking about, that dedication, that commitment. And obviously sports is one avenue, and there's so many different avenues that our classmates and others have taken at prep. But the culture, right, just is about excellence. It's about
Yeah.
expecting that whether you're in the band or you're, in the arts or you're in sports, it's about being the best version of yourself that you can be. And that's what our teachers and coaches, hold us to.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing is, anyone who listens to this and knows me or played on those teams knows, like, I was the team clown. Like, so it was those bus trips. I was always trying to make, people laugh. And yeah, it was
You
coaches
don't
knew.
say.
They didn't try to change me, to be honest. Like, it was kind of like, if you performed on the field, like, be you. And so that was kind of a cool thing. They could have easily, kicked me off the team, but yeah, they kind of, what they taught me was like right place, right time. So
That's funny. I have a 6-year-old boy, and I'm trying to teach him that right now. It's
yeah,
like sometimes it's okay to be silly. Sometimes it's
yeah,
okay to, we need to be serious. And so, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
yeah.
And you've mentioned a couple times with, just kind of relating to what you do for a career now and how,
Mhm.
maybe a lot of that tied into when you were at prep. Can you share a little bit with us more about how, you think the things you've been able to do in your career, prep kind of help prepare you in certain ways to be able to do what you're doing now and help kind of start that foundation?
Absolutely. I mean, I know specifically one of the things that and I don't. I wonder if did you have Mr. Shar at all? Was he
Yep.
around? Yeah. I
Yep.
mean, so Mr. Shar's freshman video project. I don't know if he was still doing with you guys, but we were, this is during the age of like, prank shows, and like we liked that stuff growing up. And then it was like, we go to a school, and one of the projects is to make a video, like kind of just like based on whatever. And I remember it just being such a fun project because we had no idea what our classmates were going to come up with. And I think we just made like a silly commercial, but it was like getting out there with friends, being creative, making stuff, using what was around us, getting behind the camera, teaching ourselves how to edit. I remember that one of those first, times I was exposed to that was through Mr. Shard's video project at the end of freshman year. And then as we went on, and I can't recall the teacher, but they ended up having like a media class. And then my junior and senior year, the theater department kind of got a revitalization under the teacher was Mr. McGrath. And so that was the first year I didn't do any spring sports. I actually ended up doing theater. So it was like football in the fall and then theater in the spring, which, it's like you have this jock persona, but then I've always had that, and I always wanted to pursue the arts a little bit and to get, just get thrown into the theater program. And, we had some of our co-stars were girls from Villa. And so like, and just be a part of that production from, building the set to learning lines to promoting it and whatnot, junior and senior year, a lot of that stuff, like the core of that is like the core of what I do now. And so that was the first time I, got on stage, like, again, like I mentioned, I was a class clown and I would get in trouble for that a lot, but it was finally like prep also was a place where like, oh, go on stage. This is that right place that we were talking about before.
Yeah.
And, if you really want to do this, try it. And so I kind of got to throw myself into the fire and learn and be on stage and perform and see all aspects of a production as well. So again, just, yeah, I was like really happy that high school was able to offer that for me.
Yeah. And obviously Mr. Shar is a legend, right? I
Such a
mean,
legend, yeah.
a legend teacher here at prep who, I mean, he was here for so many years, taught so many kids. And but he is one of those teachers that really stands out to everybody. And then it's cool to hear about how his influence in that project that you were able to be a part of was kind of the exposure for you to even start to dabble in this. And then going into the theater program, now it's, to your point, right place, right time to be, very loud and be able to expose, be yourself in that regard. It's really cool to hear about how those influences kind of led to some of the stuff you're doing now, which I'm really excited to talk to you about kind of your career journey, how you've been able to do what you've done. I think a lot of people will be interested to hear, just the stories that you have too about
Sure.
some of the different names that we've mentioned that you've been a part of as well. So it's pretty cool. And we read your bio and we kind of got to
Yeah.
introduce you a little bit to share with everybody about who you are and what you do. Can you talk to us about like how you got started in this industry? I mean, we kind
Yeah.
of get the idea of your persona and who you are, but how did it end up becoming that this is what you wanted to do for your career, do for
Yeah.
work? And is it kind of what you started to envision yourself doing after you left prep?
It was actually during prep. I mean, it was senior year was the first time I ever did stand up. My mom saw a listing in the paper for comedy classes at Junior's Last Laugh. I'm not even sure if it's
Mm.
still called that, but yeah, right there on State Street.
Yeah.
So signed up for a class my senior year, and it was the first time I like professionally got on stage. I guess was they had a class like a 8-week class, and then the graduation was getting on stage and performing for the first time. And that was when I did it, and it went okay. Like, if you had asked me right after that, I would have been like, "Oh, I killed! Like, I'm gonna be famous or whatever." But it went fine. But it was enough. Like, I got bit by the bug of like, "Oh, I want to do this." And then so that's like when I started to explore like how does one go out and like make this a career. And so I kind of just started studying my favorite comedians out there and reading books about Saturday Night Live, about late night talk shows, like how to be a writer, how to be a performer, how do you write your own shows, how do you make your own stuff. And that landed me. I ended up going to film school for a semester at Point Park University. I was in Pittsburgh, and the reason why I ended up leaving there after one semester was I just felt like Pittsburgh didn't have enough opportunities to like do it yourself. Like there wasn't enough stand-up shows, there wasn't a lot of like movie making there. And so I went back to Erie and went to Gannon for a year just to get a bunch of general credits because I knew I was going to transfer somewhere else. Just because I really just wanted to just like save money. I was living in my own apartment at 18 at the time. And just figure out how to do this. And I would drive to Cleveland, I would drive to Pittsburgh, and I would do shows here and there. And then I got accepted into this program at Second City, which anyone who's familiar, it's where like a lot of people from SNL started, from like Tina Fey, Chris Farley, Tim Robinson. Now it's this training center that then they also put up their own shows, and then SNL scouts and people from television and movies come and like scout people out there. And so I got accepted into that program when I was 19, and then I just moved to Chicago, and that was really the start of like doing comedy every night, taking classes during the day, doing road gigs all over the country for nobody, for just the smallest towns of the country and just really cutting my teeth. And my first big break was I was doing a stand-up show in Chicago. The booker for Conan O'Brien's show saw me, and he actually like I had an okay comedy set, and he came up to me and goes, "Hey, just want to say I like what you're doing. You're not ready for the show yet, but if you're ever out in LA, like let me know if you ever need anything." And I was like, I actually need an internship to finish out college. And he was like, send me an application. And then I ended up getting an internship at Conan when it was on TBS. And while I was an intern, I was also just writing up sample packets to try to submit to other shows. And I wrote a sample packet. The people over at Jimmy Fallon's show saw it, and I got hired as a staff writer at 24, and spent some time there. And that was just started my TV career, and like paying my bills completely with comedy. And then, yeah, I mean, so everyone, I guess when I tell those stories, or anyone who's like not in the business, they always think, oh, that's when you like made it. And it was, jobs, you get one job, it doesn't mean that's your job for the rest of your life, especially these days in industry. And so after that job, it was kind of dry, and I had moved to LA, and I was just, sort of just doing stand up here and there. Nothing was really going anywhere. And I started a basketball game just to like kill time and stay, exercising and whatnot. And I started a basketball game across from my apartment, and one by one, I would like an invited comedian I met here, or a producer I met here, or a writer or director or whatever. And then this regular basketball game started. And about a year into that game, a producer over at Funny or Die, as you mentioned for my bio, was like, oh, we have this partnership with the Detroit Pistons, and the Pistons want somebody to come in and start making just like out of the box, experimental, out of the ordinary content for their team. And then they're like, do you have any advice? Like, not even saying like, do you want this job? Like, do you have any advice? And I just went home and I wrote one of those packets, just like as many ideas as I thought, and I was also, again, like I was such a sports fan, but I never in my wildest dreams thought I could work in sports. Like I was doing everything I can to pursue a creative career, but like sports, like the only way in I thought was by being an athlete, even like from doing commentary, like it's retired athletes at this point.
Yeah.
And but this was like the start of social media, and like now that you see like the Bleacher Reports of the world, the complexes, the bar stools or whatever, like this was the beginning of that. And I was using my creative skills to celebrate my sports fandom, and I used that at the Pistons, and that got recognized by the Bleacher Reports of the world, and I got hired to run the creative over at Bleacher Report, and from there, like some of the stuff I was doing there was getting recognized, and then I went to the NFL to do it for them, and then Bleacher Report hired me back, and then during the pandemic, when everyone was sort of, kind of like looking around, like what's the world going to look like, and like leaving their jobs, starting their own things. I actually decided to go off on my own because I had a lot of places like NBA 2K, Madden, all these other companies were hitting me up asking if I would be interested in working with them, and I was like, I can't decide. Like, and also, like, maybe I should leave here or whatever. And that's when I started kind of like the primer of what I do now. It's called Falling Through Studios, and we are a creative studio that specializes in making content that is like the intersection of sports and culture. So we do a lot of media and marketing for players, teams, leagues, and brands, all kind of just like celebrating the fun of sports. But yeah, that all kind of started, again, just like the two sort of basic genres of performance and creativity in sports, which was just very much what I was doing at Prep.
Well, thank you for like walking us through that, because it's so cool. I love to hear about someone's journey, because sometimes you hear, a highlight like yours and the great success you've had, and the different people you've met, and it's like, oh, he's got it made now. But I loved hearing this part of your story where you were going to perform to nobodies and no name towns, just all over the country, just right, like getting your creative muscle, like developing yourself, getting the skill set, working at that. I think it's just one of those, most important fundamental things that requires us in success, regardless of what field it's in, is you got to have that commitment and dedication to get good at your craft. And I think that's something that any of us listening can take from your story, is that there is going to be a period of just keeping your head down and just grinding and just going through it and just doing what you got to do. And I really like that part of your story. And then it's cool to hear, as you've continued to work and work and work, the different people you started to connect yourself with, and the different conversations you started to have. And then it leads to this opportunity and then that opportunity. It probably sometimes you have to look back and think, how did I even get here? But it's really cool to hear.
It's really crazy. I mean, right now we're living in Indianapolis, Indiana right now, because as I told you before, we just had our second kid, and we have no family because we live in the West Coast in LA. And I'm from Erie. My wife's from here in Indianapolis. We have no family out there. And so we're like, hey, for a few months, let's go live in Indiana with her parents and have that help. And one of the things that my wife and I, or one of the common things that my wife and I, when we first started dating, was she is a diehard Colts fan. And so I remember just being like, oh, Colts, like a guy from my school, Bob Sanders, played for the Colts. And she's like, I love Bob Sanders. And Bob Sanders was part of my brother's class. And it was like one of our first things that we like shared in common was our love for Bob Sanders. And so now, and like we go to games and stuff here and there, and like Bob will be there, and I'll be like, yeah, me and Bob, we both played prep football, even though he was on a whole nother level. But yeah, there's just such like an overlap. Like it's prep never leaves you. You see it. You can live in another side of the world, but it'll get mentioned in some way in your life.
That's awesome, because you have your times at prep, it helped you in your career, and then look at that, a little connection like that helped you get introduced and talk with your wife, future wife, be able to have that. That's really neat. One of the events I went to this past Saturday was to visit with the class of '85, and one of the guys I was talking with went to Iowa, and so you talk about Bob Sanders again, and then Ed Hinkle, and he's like, oh, those guys are legends around here.
Yeah, I always bring up, I'm like, Ed Hinkle, like I feel like he could have played pro, but it's like um, again, just that 99 and 2000 team, Juwan Walker, like the Dance brothers, like I was like these guys when we were watching them, we all very much thought they were going to go pro. Like Charles Rush, I'm like, I was
Yeah.
like, I can't believe I got to see these guys, and seeing them in like ranked number 2 in the country was it was so cool. And then yeah, Bob is like someone anyone who's ever like watched a second of NFL football knows who Bob Sanders is. I was like, his name
Yeah.
is actually Damon Sanders. That's what we knew him
That's right.
as
Yeah.
well. So
Yeah. It's so cool. And his plaque is still up in the the trophy hall we have at Prep. We
yeah.
actually give you a visual. We took out all those lockers on the first floor and
Mm-hmm.
we actually put a whole nother trophy case on the other side because when we merged with
Amazing.
Villa, we brought all their trophies over too. So we have all the state championship trophies on one side, all the region and district trophies on another side, and we have the Bob Sanders plaque still up there on the wall
Nice.
to this day, which is awesome to display. But going back kind of to your professional journey, one of the questions that I had for you, and this is not one that maybe I wrote down or not, but I think of myself as a funny guy. I'm pretty witty, around the
Yeah.
office and whatnot. But I can only imagine the creative juices it must take to do it as a living because
Yeah.
everyone's always demanding something new, something fresh, something more. How do you keep your content, fresh? How do you keep thinking of new ideas and continually evolving your creativity to be
Yeah.
able to perform?
I mean, we talked about just that, failing a bunch. It's just not being precious about anything. And it's about being confident. And I mean, yeah, not everything is a home run. And you mentioned actually, we talked about Pat Grab, who is sort of like the leader of like our '05 class. And I remember something that Pat Grab said when because I was all quantity. Like I was all quantity, just make every joke that I could when we were in class. And 10 of them in a row could just bomb and no one laughed. But that 11th one would just be the funniest thing that I feel like I've ever said and everyone ever said. And so I remember, yeah, Pat just like pointing out, is like CJ plays a quantity game. And that's sort of a skill that you need to have in this business is you just got to keep trying and trying. And like, honestly, those failures build up. They become like integral pieces and foundation to that piece that is successful. Not to like speak too deeply about like jokes and comedy, but like,
Yeah.
it's like because the thing is like your wins are going to get broadcasted. Your losses are just going to just slowly just like get buried, and no one will remember those. People are going to remember your wins, and so. But then most successful people will tell you it's all those failures and losses that are going to build you to who you are today. And so even just as minuscule as just like making content, it's like you got to be fine just like every day or however often regularly just making stuff, just like getting
Yeah.
those reps. You got to get those reps. Like that was a big thing that they told us, or like I read from like successful comedians that I looked up to, was getting stage time anywhere. And when I was starting out, like shows were starting outside of the comedy clubs. They're happening in back rooms at bars. They're happening just in bookstores and random places. And so the stage time was there. So it was like, just get up. Don't ask how much you're getting paid. Just go up. You're practicing. Like, even if you bomb, that's something you're going to learn. And you just like, it just becomes a part of your life, just like getting up there and taking these swings. And then, yeah, hoping to hit a home run. And I feel like I've hit a home run a couple of times. I've hit doubles or whatever, and you just keep playing the game a little bit.
That's a great analogy. And I think it's something, again, it's cool to hear how you took that question and then turned it into talking about failure and just playing the
Yeah.
quantity game. I think of myself as a quantity guy also because it took me a little while early in my professional career to get over that fear of failure, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of us get crippled by that because we think in terms of that school mentality of you don't want to not get everything right. You want to try to, get all the questions to the answers right for a test. But with life, it's different. It's like you want to go out there and try new things and fail and learn from them and refine them. One of the podcasts that I listen to is, I'm sure you're familiar with Gary Vaynerchuk.
Mm-hmm.
He
Yep.
talks about if you had to go out there and produce something 20 times and fail every time, but number 21 was your success, how long would it take you to get to number 21? Like just have
Yeah.
that mentality of just keep trying and keep pushing through. That's really cool. I love your perspective on that, just in regards to creativity and telling jokes, how it really is a skill that as you see it as and something that you have to develop. Um, One of the questions I did have for you that I shared is I thought it'd be pretty cool if people could hear some of the stories that you've had about,
Hmm.
I mentioned a few of the names of people you've met, but
Yeah.
any cool stories that you can share with us, Erieites, about different, conversations you've had. When I was with your group, class of '05, they're like, yeah, John Wall you hosted a podcast with.
Yeah.
You met Shaq, all these different
Yeah.
things. So maybe you could indulge a little bit and kind of share with us some stuff.
Yeah, I'll share. So comedy wise, the one I mentioned, I worked at Conan, and that was cool. Like, and with Conan as an intern, like you're the lowest of the like org chart, and
Right.
so you're seeing him, but you never really get to talk to him. And I had been there for a few months, and then I'd gotten that late. I got hired for Jimmy Fallon, but I was having to finish out that week at Conan. And my boss was like, "Oh, on your last day, we got to tell Conan that you're going on to write for Jimmy." And so I got to, like, they took me backstage, and I got to sit with Conan. He gave me some advice about going to go work at late night, and he's like, "Don't learn from me. I got fired. I got fired from NBC." And but it was just, and Conan, I definitely think, like, there's a lot of comedians that are like celebrities out there who you're like, don't meet your heroes or don't meet famous people because they can turn out bad. And like Conan is, and you'll ask anyone in the industry, Conan is even nicer than he appears on TV. And he was my hero. Like, I remember, in addition, just like to fooling around in class or like being the class clown, like staying up late at night, growing up in Erie and watching Late Night with Conan O'Brien, like that was my first sort of exposure to like comedy was Conan. So he was my favorite. So I got to meet him. And that was like very early in my career. And he had this, when he got fired from the Tonight Show, or like that was ending, he had this incredible speech that I recommend anyone ever wants to be inspired to do anything. This incredible speech that he gave about just like work hard and be nice. And like that's a core thing. And like to get to sit down with him and sort of hear not exactly that, but just him continuing to like give that sort of advice was just like kind of like a relief in this like really, really hard business that I was sort of just getting started at. So Conan is definitely someone who was incredible to me. Yeah, in terms of sports, it's been so random. I mean, like, we're doing a podcast right now, and podcasts are such, the norm these days. And so it's so wild, like sort of the format of athlete podcasts. You have like the famous athlete, and then you have like a kind of like a sidekick who is keeping it on the rails. And because I've like have this reputation of knowing social media, knowing the sport, knowing media as well, like I kind of get made as that main guy who like keeps on the rails and asks these athletes questions. So I've gotten to host a show on Twitch with Richard Jefferson, who's become a friend of mine. And he is just like, I remember, we just got first thrown onto a stream, and I was like, oh yeah, he's being nice. He's funny. Like, he's being nice to me. He's like shouting me out, propping me up there. And then and like in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, it's probably going to end, it's probably just all for show. And then he was like, he would text me, he'd invite me out to lunch, dinner, come hang out at his house. And so he's just like, in what I found out about him was like, he had retired. He had a pretty great career, won that 2016 NBA championship, that one of the most legendary finals ever. And he was grinding himself to become a relevant broadcaster. And also like, and he also saw social media as really important. So like he was learning how to, the strategy of making content for his own accounts. And he was very much just like asking me for advice. And I was like, this is crazy. And like, every time he would text me, I would like show my wife, I'm like, me and Richard Jefferson are friends. And so it allowed me to have this like sense of like, oh, I belong in the same room as these guys. And then, yeah, and then just from like, yeah, just from working in this business, like I've become friendly with some people over at Clutch, which is LeBron's agency, and we had hit them up because we needed an NBA co-host for our podcast Point Game. And John Wall wanted to get into it, and he had such a rich career, college career, NBA career, and we wanted someone who could not only tell stories about their playing time and their experience in the league, but also like kind of give their lens to the game today. And so got to do that with him, and looking forward to more episodes of that. And yeah, and then I end up hosting a lot of like streams and random shows with people like Adam Lefko, who's inside the NBA analyst, and Taylor Rooks, who's now going on to Amazon. And that's what it's honestly, it's like what has kind of made me kind of give me ease about this business is that I have no idea who I'm going to work with next, or like I have no expectation of like I need to be working with this famous athlete or whatever. I'm just like I got to just keep making my own stuff and like working every day and putting stuff out there. And then, if I'm doing that, something cool is bound to happen. And
Yeah.
that's just kind of like, yeah, I'm like, my friends ask like, who would I want to work with next? Um, and I haven't even worked with LeBron. I've been like close to, like I've been on set with him around or whatever, but yeah, like LeBron maybe, but like I want to work with like Caitlin Clark. Like I really am enjoying like the WNBA and the new personalities like Paige Beckers and Asia Wilson, and we directed a thing with her, Sabrina Ionescu. Like it's just cool. Like there's new athletes out there that I'm like excited to sort of like as I grow, like there's gonna be new athletes for me to potentially work with again, and do cool stuff in this business. So yeah, I still get starstruck. I'm still like, this is really cool. Like I still freak out. Offset, like when I'm done with the
Yeah.
work, I'm like, oh my god, that was so cool. But I try not to fan out when I'm working with them in the moment.
Yeah. I mean, I think I always, so I started this podcast for prep like 3 years ago, and it's been cool to be able to connect with so many Prepinville alumni, and some of the people I've had on, I get a little starstruck with who they are. But it's a totally different level for what you're doing. I mean, these are like some of those famous athletes in the world, and it's
Yeah.
just amazing to hear about the people you've had the chance to interact with.
Mm-hmm.
But really, as we talked about earlier, that the skill set you developed is what has been able to get you there. It's not just by chance or luck, or you're just CJ and this is who you are. I mean, that's
Yeah.
obviously true, but you also put a lot of work into your craft to be able to get to where you've been and do what you've been able to do. And so it's cool. I appreciate you, sharing those stories about people you've met and everything.
I will say one of the encounters that was luck was when I was working at Blockbuster on West 12th Street, and as many people know, the lead singer of Train used to come in there. Who everyone knows he's from Erie. I don't know if he like lived there during the summers, but he was a regular customer of mine. I was like, oh my god, like I had never met anybody at that point. I was 17 working at Blockbuster, and I was like,
Yeah.
the lead singer from Train. I like wanted to ask him so many questions, but yeah, that was probably like the first brush of a famous person I ever had, was working at that Blockbuster.
That's really cool. That's awesome. Um, I want to, we got, 10, 15 minutes left in
Yeah.
terms of what we'll record here. So just a couple more questions, then we'll wind down. Wanted to talk to you a little bit about too, provide some good content for our listeners about,
Yeah.
it seems like, and I didn't know what to expect going into this conversation with you because we haven't met before, but how being a comedian, you seem like you're very focused though, very, very business minded, very, savvy, you got a real plan and vision for when you're putting stuff together. Seems like comedy is your product, right? In terms of what you're marketing and selling is
Yeah.
what your company can provide. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you balance your creativity and the marketing and all the different media things you do, but also with the side of you're running a business too. So there's
Yeah.
different components in that where this is something that any of us can learn from you in terms of how you run your business, how you are marketing your business to potential customers, just different tips and suggestions you've learned based on your years in
Sure.
business.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny. It's like, and I was such an anti-businessman and didn't want to be, I mean, math was my worst subject, and just seeing numbers overwhelmed me, and it seemed so boring. It seemed like a lot of reading. But what I had learned over the years is like so many people, there were so many comedians, and so many were funny. I've met some of the funniest comedians who never were, discovered or successful. Um, and my dad was a doctor, my mom was a real estate agent or whatever, and they put being able to pay my bills myself, that pressure on me very early. And so it was like, how do I make this a job? And so I mean, from the start it was like, becoming a huge like Eddie Murphy overnight. I just counted that out immediately, but I was like, oh, there are people who make a living in this pretty early, and those are writers. So like I chased being a writer. Like I was trying to find the entry points into making this, a professional reality. And so that kind of like stuck with me. It was like, with my resume, like where can I sort of enter into some of the, parts of this industry? So it was like years of doing that. And then now that I'm running my own thing, I've kept that same thing. It's like, your work is only as good as like, to the people, like it being seen. It's like you can have amazing work, but it doesn't mean anything if no one's seeing it, right? So it was learning like social media. It's like I didn't go to school for advertising, but what was kind of lucky for me and what I realized early on was like social media was such a powerful tool. From building a following on Twitter, and on Instagram, and people being able to build that not through like business hacks or like something you read in a book, but just by like being authentic and like, oh, people are liking this sort of content from me. Okay, I got to double down on that. And then, oh, if people are starting to like get bored by that content, how do you sort of reinvent a new thing? Or like, like I run a creative sports studio, which is, I think, pretty unique to maybe people in Erie, but like there's so many sports creative agencies out there who have worked with Nike for 40 plus years. And like Nike is our main client. And so I had to set myself apart from them. And I remember when I first started Follow Through, I'd met some people at Nike, just like randomly. I was, through freelance gigs or whatever. And I remember I was just like, I was trying to get people to answer emails and nothing was really happening. And I needed a new logo for our company just to like appear, in our tagline on our emails, and just like on invoices or whatever. And I one of my favorite movies is Wayne's World, and I looked at the Wayne's World logo, and I was like, oh, I can kind of flip that or like make a parody logo with Follow Through's name. And I made that. I really liked how that looked, and I made hats out of it. And I posted a picture of that hat, and everyone was like, oh, I want that hat, blah blah. So I sent it to some of the friends who were asking for it. But then I started sending it to really successful people out there who were sort of in my same industry. And the hat kind of got this like, kind of just like this like cult status, and I would use that as like, hey, what's your address, I want to send you something. And those people were like, oh, is it the hat? I'm like, yep. And then I was like, and then I would love to grab some time on your calendar, in a week or two or whatever. And that was like the start of Follow Through. And then it's like, it's like you got to give, if people are a fan of you or like support you, they want to have that sort of reminder. They want to like consume a dose of your personality or your skill or your talent, on a regular basis. And I think it goes back and forth of like how much we need that, whether it's every day. You can like do every day and it's kind of just like, here's a day in the life, or here's a thought for the day. But then there's also like, you can do, more premium videos or writing on a weekly basis. But like people want to hear from you regularly, and you kind of keep that up. And then you're also like, you're appeasing your current audience, and that stuff is only stuff that can be discovered by new audiences, and you hope to like build that audience over time. And I say all that, and it's like, that's advice I need to continue to have, because it can just get so taxing, and you're like, oh, I'm not doing what I'm good at or what I love, and that's creating. I'm spending too much time on marketing and whatnot. But it's about finding that perfect balance, which it's something I still like, I'm striving and learning how to do every day.
Yeah, I mean, totally. When it comes to social media, it's constantly evolving, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you look at the platforms that are most popular today weren't necessarily the most popular 5 years ago.
Yeah.
The way our algorithms and the feeds work, the way it's more interest-based versus just collecting followers and doing that. There's so many more ways to get discovered. And I've kind of been learning just focusing on your niche. That's one of the things that I've been really learning a lot about, is just really, hone in on what your niche is and then just go all in on that.
Yeah.
And your customers or your people will, they'll be discovered because they're going to have those similar interests.
Absolutely.
But I think for our listeners who are in business for themselves or have, types of occupations to promote themselves, I always hesitated with being able to do that. 'Cause I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to, what do I say? What do I do? And any advice for those people who kind of are really on that fence of, they know social media is important. They see the way the world's going. They want to get on there, but they're just nervous of maybe embarrassing themselves or looking silly, starting to post content. What advice maybe would you have for people in that kind of camp right now?
I mean, a lot of it's like, I always looked up to people and like saw like, you mentioned like Gary Vaynerchuk and like all these people of like, you can dig up the earliest stuff. Like and you can find them telling stories about how they were embarrassed, but everyone is going to make fun of you until you're successful, and it's just, everyone, like, life is short. Like, just try the stuff, or else don't. It's just gonna fester inside of you, and just like you're gonna regret. Like, the being like regretting stuff is eats away at you more than being embarrassed. Like, you just, like, if something is inside you, get it out. Like, if you believe in something, get it out. Like, have fun with it. Don't put so much pressure on it. And again, this is all stuff like I need to take my own advice with. I have
Yep.
ideas in my head, and I'm like, oh, I got to get it out, or I create excuses of like, oh, I just had a kid, so I'll wait till they're like, a year older, they're sleeping through the night before I start pursuing it. When in fact, like, there's little times and windows where I can, start pursuing it in certain ways, like take baby steps to it. Or like, if you have an
Yeah.
idea, just like don't, it doesn't need to be the best version, but just get it out of your head. Even if that means writing it down on a piece of paper and like saying, hey, by this date, I'm going to make this thing and put it out, or I'm going to send this email to this person. Just like do it, chase inspiration, get inspired like by those people, and just, yeah, just go out there and make stuff. And like, you truly have no idea where it can take you.
And I think it ties into everything that you were talking about earlier, that, not having that fear of failure, being willing to, to your point, you were a quantity guy, as Pat was
Mhm.
joking with you about. You're a quantity guy.
Yeah.
You almost just develop that muscle of just creating those habits of this is what you do, this is who you are. And eventually, to your point, that success is going to come and you're going to figure out what works and what doesn't. And they will all become CJ Toledanos out there in the world doing great things like you.
Well, I'll tell you one story that I actually, I said I played football for 4 years. It's funny, my senior year, I decided I didn't want to play. And, they all had training camp. And I remember, and then the school year started, and I was like asking my friends, hey, let's go hang out after school. And they're like, we have football practice. And I was like, man, I lost all my friends are playing football. And so I remember seeing Coach Mishler in the hallway, and I was like, I don't even know why. I was just like, you know what the hell? I'm gonna regret not asking. I was like, I'm just gonna ask if I can just like be a practice player this year, just because I love football, and I just was like, what else am I gonna do? This is my last year. So I asked him, and he's like, come to practice. And they didn't give me pads, and for a week I had to practice with the team. And then at the end of that week, they were going to decide, the whole team was going to vote on whether I could be on the team. I
Mm.
remember just that week with like no pads. I'm like, what am I doing? Like, and I'm just like, what, why do I need to do this? But I just had that feeling inside of me. I'm like, oh, I just want, like, I didn't want to regret not playing my, because you're not going to go play football in college. Like, football is kind
Yeah.
of like, when you're done, you're done. And I just gave it my all. And again, like, I had that sort of like reputation of being like the class clown. Like, what is CJ doing? And I gave it my all that week, and they let me on the team. And I like we actually ended up coming up pretty short. Like, I think we were ranked in the state, had a decent ranking, but like we ended up losing to McDowell, I think either before the playoffs or in the first round of the playoffs. But like, I look back on that, and that year was one of my favorite like sports playing years ever. And actually, our neighbor here in Indianapolis, he played for the Colts, legendary tight end Jack Doyle, and like I still share football stories with him of like, and he went on to play for the Colts, and I'm like sharing high school stories. And I'm just so happy I have that in my history in my past, that I just went for it and I played, because I knew it wasn't going to be a D1 athlete or even a D2 athlete, but it was just like, just gonna do it. Like, you never know how it's going to pay off in the end.
Yeah. I heard it once defined as the pain of discipline or the pain of regret.
Yeah.
You're going to have to choose a pain that you want to have. And obviously, that was something that was like in your heart. Like you were like, to your point, you saw Mish and you're like, this is what I want to do. And
Yeah.
good thing you went for it. Otherwise, all these years later, you probably would have been saying, what if I would have done that? What if I would have done that? So kudos to you as this 17-year-old kid, putting yourself out there to
Yeah.
legendary coach Mish to, just ask if he'd consider that. And I'm sure not a day goes by you don't regret making that decision to do that.
1000%. Yeah.
Yeah,
The only
that's really
the
cool.
regret I'll have is that I can't send my boys to prep unless for some reason we end up in Erie. But I am, when it comes to high school, I am going to be asking around and like describing. I'm like, oh, I'm looking for a school that was like this and whatever, and like a community, and like a sense of brotherhood, and hopefully we find something like it.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what. But so Pat Gravy. We've been talking about him all throughout the podcast.
Yeah.
He's got 4 young boys. Me and my wife, we have 4 kids,
Oh,
right
awesome.
around Pat's kids' ages. So between
Yeah.
us, we're working on keeping prep open. So, if you end up moving back to Erie, all our kids can just go to prep together. So we'll
Again, you
see.
never know. You never know what's going to happen. But yeah.
That's funny. Well, I got one last question for you. We just got a couple minutes left here. We'll have to do a part 2 at some time in the future because
Love that. Yeah.
there was a lot we didn't get to go into, but I'm excited about all the great stuff you're doing. So it was a fun little bonus question. I ask every alum who comes on as a guest, and so it's kind of a neat little theme at the end here. But if you could go back in time, 20 years ago now, to your graduation and be the speaker at your graduation to your classmates, but knowing what you know now in your life, what message would you maybe share with your classmates at that time?
Oh man, that's tough. I mean, I don't know if did anyone tell the story of what I did at our graduation as well?
I haven't heard that
I don't
one.
think it's too inappropriate, but there's a video of it. If you go to my TikTok, I put a long piece of toilet paper onto my shoe and walked across. And I don't remember who was saying don't give him his diploma, but Mrs. McCain, actually, who I tormented. I don't know if she's still there or if you ever.
She's not, but I had her. Yeah.
Okay. I tormented her my time during there, and she was the one who got my diploma and made sure I got it, and no one could hold it back from me for doing that prank. That prank is on TikTok and it went viral. So, anyways, but if I got to go back to speak at our graduation, which actually another thing too, I was going to speak, but I had bad grades at the time, and I pulled them back up, but they're like, we don't know if we can live speak, which back then I was like, that's messed up. But now I'm like, I get it,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Again, all those things you're mad at the time, but now I'm raising my son. You can't reward bad behaviors or else that pattern's not going to change.
No matter how funny you are. Right.
Exactly. I definitely got close in some of the demerits. I put up some big numbers without ever really attempting to leave, but, what would I say? I mean, it's a lot of what I've been saying over this conversation is just if you have a passion, just follow it. Let that just inspire you. And you just never know where these things are going to take you. You can't predict the future, but what you can control is how much you love and believe in something. And that can come out through hard work. That can come out through standing up for what you believe in and supporting others that are doing it, and just being involved. And so see that opportunity, see the privileges and things that that you have that others don't. I think it was a huge privilege to get to go to prep. And it's something, and there's a lot of great schools in Erie, but there was a lot of things that we got to I don't think there's McDowell podcasts out there talking about their times there, and there's just stuff that we were allowed to have, that we got, and teachers there that were inspiring me, and teachers there, who weren't telling me to stop doing things. But I believed in certain things, and I got that motivation and that inspiration to follow that stuff. So like I said, you don't want to spend your life regretting. So chase that stuff as long as it's positive. Obviously if it's hurting others, right, don't do that. But you just never know what things can become if you just believe and you chase it.
Amen to that, brother. That's awesome. I mean, I love that. I think it just culminates everything that really made my time at prep so special is, just creating that vision for what you want your life to be, and then being able to help create the foundation to then give you the fortitude to go chase it, to go pursue it, and go out there and try to make the best of this world as you can, but representing being a man of prep through the process. So that's awesome. And it's been really encouraging to hear about your story. It's been really cool to just chat with you a little bit and share this conversation with the listeners and being able to hear about it. Again, I didn't know, the comedian background, if you'd come in all jokey, have all the jokes for us, but it's really cool. It's been very enlightening to hear about the focus, the determination, the different skill sets you developed to be where you are. It's special. And I just want to say congratulations on all the success you've had and will have in your future, undoubtedly.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I hope to get back there soon. Actually, it's funny. The last time I visited prep, I think was right after I was moving from Detroit back to LA to then go to New York for Bleacher Report. So it was like 10 years ago, that like in April, and I just starting to see all the new renovations and whatnot, and to hear like all the other changes that the school has gone through. I'm like, oh, I'm excited to get back there. I'm just sad. Like I heard, Chef Frank isn't there, and like those lunches were legendary, and
Yeah.
yeah. So, but there's I want to walk those halls again. So I look forward to that. Hopefully, in 5 years or maybe even sooner.
Yeah, hit me up. You come sooner than 5 years, let me know. I'll give you the
Will
grand
do.
tour. We'll get Pat down and
Yeah.
we'll reminisce and have some good stories for sure. But
Sounds good.
CJ, appreciate the time. Thanks for hopping on the podcast and joining us today.
Of course. Thanks, Jimmy.
Yep, you're welcome.